Hello everyone, my name is Boulevard, and today I want to talk to you about Metroplex Zero, a brand new roguelike deck builder that is actually available right now. If you head over to the Steam store, it is March 31st when this video comes out, so if you like this review, you can actually go pick up Metroplex Zero Sci-Fi Card Battler yourself and try it out. Now, it is a roguelike deck builder, card game, card battler. All of those things completely accurate. Same genre as Slay the Spire, I think is where you're going to get the most comparisons from. And for me, I've never really played the roguelike card battler genre. It's just something that I've steered clear of for no reason in particular, and the ones that I have played haven't been dedicated games. It's like Path of Champions and Legends of Runeterra, which I wasn't a big fan of, and I can't tell if it's because it was more of a secondary game mode or because it just wasn't my preferred way to play Legends of Runeterra, but Metroplex was my first dedicated game in the genre. I'm a huge fan of the cyberpunk aesthetic, so it was a pretty easy sell. Now, I'm going to go through their actual About This Game section and let you know how accurate I think it is. So they fused card games, roguelikes, and JRPGs. Yeah, this one's pretty obvious. Those are the genres. JRPGs, the aspect of JRPGs that you are getting here is that rather than having one deck of a set number of cards, you can have between 1 and 3 characters depending on which game mode you're playing, and each one puts 12 cards in your deck, and each card in the deck is tied to one of those characters, which only matters a little bit in a couple of instances in terms of like resource management and some combo stuff in terms of if all of the cards in one turn were played by the same character. But for the most part, it just adds a lot of variety into the different ways that you can play the game. And really the name of the game here with Metroplex is variety and depth. This is a very dense game. The more time you want to put into it, the more you are going to get out of it, which I think is fair to say is an aspect of JRPGs, but mostly the multi-character battling is what I think of JRPGs and this game having in common. Now, describing it as a cross between Slay the Spire, Magic, and Shadowrun, I have never heard of Shadowrun, so I literally cannot speak to that. Slay the Spire, yeah, I'm never played Slay the Spire, but I'm getting, from what I know of Slay the Spire, huge comparison and overlap. Magic the Gathering, I have played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and I gotta say, doesn't really come to mind when I play Metroplex, other than the fact that they are both card games. But like, if you enjoy Magic the Gathering, if you're a big Magic player, I don't think Metroplex is necessarily the next step in line in your card game journey, but it's just because it's a different genre. This is a PvE card battler instead of a PvP type game. So yeah, there are going to be some differences there. And then this paragraph basically says there's a variety of strategies and heroes, which is absolutely true. Like I mentioned, the name of the game here is depth. There is so much to do in Metroplex Zero and so many different ways to play the game. And one of the things that impresses me the most about this game, before I even get into the gameplay with you, is this database tab. Now, if you've watched my content before, you know how much I love to dive into the nitty-gritty of things. And one of the problems that I can have with online card games is a lack of centralized resources. But here, it's actually in client. You can look at the card pools for each of the heroes before you want to try them out in one of the different game modes. You can also check out every power-up that is available across your runs and the rarities of them. The enemies, this is what it actually looks like. When you right-click an enemy in-game, it will tell you all of its stats, all of the moves that it can use, and one of the issues I've had in the past when demoing a card game like this before was that the developers actually hid the ultimate ability of the character, of the boss specifically, so that it could be a big surprise and you couldn't see it coming, which to me actually just pissed me off, because if you're going to lay out a boss's moveset for me, that's what I assumed you were doing. So the fact that those developers, not these developers, had hid the ultimate from me really threw a wrench in my strategy in a way that I couldn't have known was coming. So the fact that all of the information is clearly laid out in Metroplex is something that I'm a big fan of. You can also get refreshers on keywords. I know it looks like there's a lot. They're very intuitive. And there is a little bit of a story in this game. It's a little bit run-of-the-mill, a little bit cheesy, but hey, you know, you didn't really come here for the story, I suppose, but maybe you did, and maybe you'll enjoy it a little bit more than I did. I thought it was one of the weaker points of the game, but I don't think it's one of the main selling points of the game, so I didn't really think that was an issue. The story being that there are 8 megacorps, you are breaking into their society as they kind of are the shadow government of this world, and you are looking to, from my understanding, because it is a little bit choice-based, you're either looking to take them all down and, you know, liberate the people, or replace them as the evil entity ruling over the Metrocorps. And that is, you know, if you want a little bit more lore, you can actually read through the bios of those. And then the art gallery is definitely my favorite part here, where I think that these are actually really cool looking. And this foggy sort of look that the loading screens, because that's what these are, have about them, is something that I really like in the cyberpunk genre. And I want to find my favorite one for you here, this one. I think this one is absolutely beautiful. There is something about being on an open street with like these clouds and these like really tall buildings all around you that I love in a way that I really only get when I feel like when I play cyberpunk games. They're the only ones that'll build these massive skyscrapers and let me run around with them in this sort of darker aesthetic. So I have to give huge props for having the database tab. Now, in terms of the actual ways to play the game, there is a story mode. There's a tutorial, there's a story mode. I found each run that I did to be about an hour. I think the tutorial took me about an hour, the story modes took me about an hour, and then you can go through and play in a couple of different ways, even pick your bosses, pick your heroes. And there is also a draft function, because I know that people that like deck builders tend to like drafting, and of course you can go with 3 heroes, 2 heroes, or 1. You go through a pretty lengthy drafting phase, and honestly, yeah, I did find myself getting a little bored during the drafting phase, but I have yet to find a game where I didn't get bored in the drafting phase. So I think that is just something that I, as a player, have within me, and not necessarily points against the Metroplex team. I think they did as good a job as they could have, and everything is fairly intuitive. You can see the rarities at the bottom of the cards, and you are drafting per character. So if you are going for the triple hero run, then yeah, it's going to take you a while to get through the drafting phase, but I know that is where some of you find enjoyment in this genre. So as far as the actual gameplay goes, I tried out a couple of different strategies. My favorite one was actually one of the first ones that I went with, where I played an assassin, and then rather than using all of her damaging cards, I used her for armor and a Mars Shred, and then used ramp with my favorite character, FL12 the Fire Mage, and just kind of looked to ramp up and one-shot the entire team with a big AoE fire spell, piercing damage enemy that gets more deadly over time. Taking 2 actions per turn, a weak version followed by a big one. She's able to give value, stuns, dodges, and H6. Take out these 2 first. I can actually front to back this. And I played through everything on casual mode just because I am rather new to roguelike card games like this, and I didn't want to just kind of get blown out of the water or have to, like, you know, go through and then restart the run. So I kind of avoided that and just went on casual mode so I could play with my brain off a little bit more, because this is the kind of game that I personally would like to play with my brain off a little bit more. I tend not to get super deep into things unless it is a PvP game, but I think that I could find myself spending enough time in Metroplex that I actually do get interested in getting really good at the PvE. It's just not where I'm at in my card game journey right now, but I very well could see myself there in the future. Now, as far as what I would rate this game, let me break it down for you step by step. The weakest point of this game, like I mentioned, was the story. And again, you are not really here for the story. So as much as that is its weakest point, it's more of a minor gripe than anything. It's your standard run-of-the-mill cyberpunk story. The dialogue is pretty uninspired. There's no voice acting. That said, I did laugh out loud a couple of times, genuinely. And that was more from the absurdity of what was being said, more so than what was said being humorous, if that makes sense. What? I'm sorry, what? It caught me off guard. And I'm sure that the deeper I get into the story, the more situations like that I could possibly have. But for the most part, things just seemed a little too, you know, run-of-the-mill for me. It's not really super inspired. It's not redefining the genre. You really didn't expect it to, right? So I can give that a bit of a pass. Say the story is about a 5 out of 10. Of course, 5 out of 10, for those of you who can't do math, is average, right? That's how Boulevard scores things out of 10. 5 is average. None of this American school grading system where 7 is average. No, 7 is above average. 5 is average. That is what I would give the story, because that is what it was. It felt very average to me. Now, the draft mode, I actually did enjoy more than I thought I would. As much as the drafting actually kind of dragged on, the idea that I could consistently replicate the strategy that I wanted to, even in the draft mode, was very appealing to me, even if I had to do a little bit of adapting around the powers or the specific cards or rares that I had gotten. And I found myself actually enjoying the gameplay loop of the drafting mode in terms of playing around the build that I had gotten and trying to force a specific build in the draft mode. And I never really felt like I was being forced one way or another every time I drafted. I felt like I had a good amount of control over the strategy and direction that I wanted to take my characters. I also felt like 3 characters was a lot, especially because of the combo mechanic in this game, where the limiting factor being you can only play 3 cards in a turn, combo being if all 3 of those cards were from the same character, then you do something something special at the end of the round. You know, obviously the less characters you have, the easier it is to do that, and combo was one of the cooler aspects of the game to me. So I think 2 characters is how I kind of preferred to play things out. It gave me 1 supporting character and then 1 carry to try and get through the early game with my supporting character while I ramped up my sort of main DPS, and then I didn't have to worry too much about my hand clunking on cards from sort of a dead third support character whose role I couldn't quite figure out, as I didn't have a lot of success trying to go DPS tank support. Support DPS seemed to be the optimal strategy for me, both in terms of clearing faster and having fun. That's just how I like to play the games. And I gotta say, I actually had an absolute blast on my first playthrough, even of the trio draft, where I more or less ignored one of my characters and then just ran through with my big ramp fire mage and my armor shred, MR shred, and then I ran that back when I did the duo draft. And that was a strategy that I thought was a lot of fun and reminds me a lot of how I like to play other card games. And yeah, you know, going back to what they said in the Steam page, is it a cross between Shadowrun, Slay the Spire, and Magic the Gathering? That is where I started to feel the Magic the Gathering come in terms of strategy overlap, being able to just play this ramp up into big spell sort of fire mage, and I had a blast doing it. So yeah, that is where I could see the MTG aspect coming in. So as far as the gameplay goes, I actually want to give this like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. I really don't have any complaints. Now, I did play the game in early access before it came out, and I gotta say, while this was sitting in my Steam library, there were constant updates for this game. The devs are absolutely nose to the grindstone on this one, keeping things fresh, very receptive to feedback. The people that I have interacted with have been an absolute delight, and I really can't say too many bad things about this game, other than, again, a pretty bland story. And I don't really think that I think the genre has a ceiling that is a little bit lower than a 10 out of 10. So as far as my actual factual rating for Metroplex Zero, I'm giving this game a 7 out of 10, which is a little bit, so 6 is a little above average, 7 is above average. Now, I haven't explored too many other games of the genre. Maybe if you're like a diehard Slay the Spire fan, you go and you try this and you're like, okay, yeah, this isn't it. I don't know. I haven't played the genre too much, but that is where I landed on as someone who is doing this for the first time. And I imagine many of you haven't explored too much into it either. So thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and, again, it is available right now on Steam. Go check out Metroplex Zero, Sci-Fi Card Battler, download it for yourself, give it a shot. Let me know what you think of it and if you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.